I was 17 when this happened, and I still think about it every time I'm home alone. It was a Friday night, and my parents had gone to a dinner party across town, leaving me in charge of the house. I didn't mind. I had an exam coming up and needed to study anyway. Our house was in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where people left their porch lights on but rarely locked their doors. That night, I was in my room, buried in my history notes, when I heard something faint outside. It wasn't distinct, just a soft shuffling noise. At first I thought it was the wind, maybe dry leaves scraping across the driveway. But something about it made me pause. I turned down the music playing from my laptop and listened. Nothing. Just the usual silence of a suburban night. I shrugged it off and went back to my notes. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed next to me. It was a motion alert from our front door camera. I frowned. No one was supposed to be coming over, and it was too late for deliveries. I opened the app and waited for the footage to load. When it did, my stomach tightened. A man was standing at the edge of the porch, half hidden by the shadows. He wasn't moving, wasn't knocking, just standing there. I stared at the screen, trying to make sense of it. He was tall, dressed in dark clothes, and his face was obscured by the angle of the camera. The longer I looked, the less sense it made. Was he lost? Was he waiting for someone? I switched to the live feed, hoping he had left, but he was still there. My heart started pounding. I thought about turning on the porch light, maybe scaring him off, but something told me not to. Instead, I did what any normal person would do. I grabbed my phone and texted my dad. "Some guy's standing on the porch. He's not doing anything, but it's weird." I kept the camera feed open, eyes locked on the screen. A minute passed, then another. And then, as if he could feel me watching, the man took a single step forward. Not towards the door, but towards the camera. My breath caught in my throat. That's when I heard it. The soft, deliberate tapping on my bedroom window. Every hair on my body stood on end. My bedroom was on the second floor. There was no way someone could be tapping on my window, unless they had a ladder. My stomach twisted as I slowly turned my head toward the glass. At first, I couldn't see anything. The blinds were partially closed, and my own reflection in the dim light made it hard to tell if there was anything beyond the window. But then, there it was, just the faintest outline of movement. My heart slammed against my ribs. I shot up from my desk so fast my chair nearly toppled over. My hands were ice cold as I reached for my phone again. My dad still hadn't responded. I switched back to the camera feed, but the man was gone. He wasn't on the porch anymore. A chill ran down my spine. I knew what that meant. He had moved. And if he wasn't at the front door anymore, he could be anywhere. Slowly, I crept toward my window, trying not to make a sound. The tapping had stopped, but I could feel something, someone, just beyond the glass. I swallowed hard and in one quick motion, pulled the blinds up an inch. My stomach dropped. There, just outside my window, was a face. Not pressed against the glass, but close enough that I could see his eyes. Dark, wide, unblinking. His lips were slightly parted, and for a second I thought I could see the fog of his breath on the window. I stumbled back, choking on a scream. I don't know what I expected him to do, but he didn't move. He didn't react at all, as if he hadn't seen me, even though I knew he had. My mind raced. There was no way he had climbed up there. There was no ledge, no way to balance. But somehow, he was there, staring. My fingers fumbled over my phone screen as I finally hit the call button for 911. My voice was barely steady when the operator answered. "There's someone outside my window," I whispered. "He was on my porch, and now he's right outside my second-floor window." The operator's voice was calm, asking for my address, but I could barely focus on the words. My eyes were locked on the window. The man still wasn't moving. He was just there. The longer I looked, the more I noticed how wrong he looked. his head tilted just slightly to one side, his skin unnaturally pale under the faint glow of my desk lamp. I don't even remember what I told the dispatcher, only that she assured me police were on their way and told me to stay somewhere safe. I backed away from the window, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. I wanted to run, but I was afraid to turn my back on him. What if he did something the second I looked away? I took another step back, and for the first time, he moved. Not in a normal way. No shift of his weight, no sound. 1 second he was still. The next, his hand slowly lifted and tapped the glass again. Just once. I bolted. I don't think I've ever moved that fast in my life. I yanked my bedroom door open, sprinting down the hall toward the staircase. As I reached the top step, something made me glance back. An instinct, like the way you check behind you when you know something is following you. I wish I hadn't. He wasn't at the window anymore. He was inside. I saw him standing in the dim light of my room, just beyond the doorway. My brain couldn't process it. The window was closed. The window was locked. There was no sound of glass breaking, no time for him to have gotten in. But there he was. And the way he stood there, his body stiff, his arms hanging awkwardly at his sides, was so wrong it made my stomach turn. I didn't wait to see what he would do. I ran. I flew down the stairs, nearly tripping over myself in my panic. My brain was screaming at me to get out of the house, to put as much distance as possible between me and that thing upstairs. But just as I reached the front door, I froze. What if he wasn't alone? What if this was some kind of setup, and the moment I stepped outside, someone else was waiting? My phone was still clutched in my hand, the dispatcher's voice faint in my ear. "Are you still there?" she asked. "Officers are on their way. Stay somewhere safe." Safe. There was nowhere safe. My bedroom was compromised, the front door felt like a trap, and every shadow in the house suddenly seemed too dark. My eyes darted toward the kitchen. It had a door that led to the backyard. Maybe I could slip out that way, hop the fence, and hide at a neighbor's house. I turned and sprinted toward it, my socks skidding against the tile as I grabbed the doorknob and twisted. Locked. My stomach dropped. I never locked that door. I was trying to unlock it when I heard it. Slow, deliberate footsteps coming down the stairs. Not running, not rushing. Just walking. I turned my head just enough to see into the hallway. A shadow stretched along the floor, growing larger as the figure descended. My breath hitched. The way he moved wasn't natural. It was too smooth, too controlled, like he wasn't touching the ground at all. The air in the house felt wrong, heavier somehow, like the walls themselves were closing in. I did the only thing I could think of. I ran for the laundry room. It was small, barely enough space for a washer and dryer, but it had a door. I threw myself inside and slammed it shut, twisting the lock with trembling fingers. My breathing was loud, too loud. I clamped a hand over my mouth, forcing myself to stay silent. My phone was still in my other hand, the dispatcher's voice coming through, but I couldn't focus on her words. All I could hear was the slow creak of the floor outside the door. He was there, standing just on the other side. For a moment, there was nothing, just thick, suffocating silence. And then, tap, tap, tap. Gentle, deliberate, right against the wood. My whole body went rigid. He wasn't trying to break in. He wasn't trying to force his way inside. He was just tapping, like he was waiting. My fingers tightened around my phone. I didn't dare make a sound. I thought I was going to pass out from holding my breath when, finally, I heard something else. Sirens. The tapping stopped. There was a long pause, and then I heard him move. The footsteps, still slow, still unnatural, drifted away, back toward the hallway. I didn't move until I heard the front door burst open, the heavy boots of officers storming inside. It took everything in me to unlock the laundry room door and stumble out. The cops found me shaking, barely able to get the words out. I told them everything. They searched the entire house, but there was no sign of him. The windows were still locked. No doors had been forced open. It was like he was never there. But I know what I saw. To this day, I don't know how he got inside. I don't know what he wanted or why he just stood there. The police chalked it up to a break-in attempt gone wrong, but I don't believe that. He wasn't trying to break in. He was already inside. I haven't stayed home alone since. And sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and I'm lying in bed, I swear I can still hear it. Tap, tap, tap. I moved into that house at the start of my sophomore year. It wasn't anything special, just a cheap rental a few blocks from campus, the kind of place that felt temporary even as I signed the lease. It had 2 floors, an unfinished basement, and creaky wooden floors that groaned under the weight of every step. I didn't mind. It was mine, and for the first time in my life, I was living completely alone. I worked late nights at a coffee shop off campus, got home around midnight, and had a routine. Lock the front door, check the windows, make sure the basement door was shut. It always was. Until the night, it wasn't. That night had been like any other. I got home, tossed my bag on the couch, and did my usual routine before heading to bed. I was dead tired, barely keeping my eyes open as I checked the locks. The basement door was closed, just like I left it. I made sure of that. I remember standing there for a second longer than usual, hand resting on the old brass knob, feeling the slight resistance as I twisted it to confirm it was locked. Then I went upstairs, shut my bedroom door, and fell asleep almost instantly. A normal night. Until I woke up at 3 a.m. At first, I didn't know why I was awake. My room was silent except for the hum of the old heating system. But then I heard it, a noise so out of place, it sent a sharp spike of adrenaline through my chest. A creak. Long, slow, unmistakable. The basement door. My heart started hammering as I lay there frozen, trying to convince myself I imagined it. But then came the sound that made my stomach drop. Footsteps, deliberate, heavy, moving across the basement floor beneath me. I shot upright in bed, heart pounding in my ears. My first thought was that someone had broken in. But that didn't make sense. I locked the door. I knew I locked it. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, debating whether to call the cops or check myself. The air in my room felt different, heavier, like the whole house was holding its breath. I crept toward my bedroom door, pressing my ear against it, straining to hear over the blood rushing in my head. The footsteps were slow, methodical, almost like whoever, or whatever, was down there wanted me to know they were there. I gripped my phone tighter, every instinct in me screaming not to move, not to make a sound. But I had to know. Holding my breath, I cracked my bedroom door open just enough to peek down the hall. The light from my phone barely reached the staircase, but I could see the faint outline of the basement door. It was open. Not just unlocked, wide open. That wasn't possible. I locked it. I checked it. The footsteps below slowed, then stopped. My skin prickled. Whoever was down there knew I was awake. My mind raced through the possibilities. Maybe I left the door open without realizing it. Maybe the wind somehow pushed it open. But none of that explained the footsteps. And none of that explained the feeling creeping up my spine, the overwhelming sense that something was wrong. I forced myself to take a step forward, my bare feet barely making a sound against the hardwood. My throat was dry, my pulse hammering so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. I hovered at the top of the stairs, my phone's weak light barely illuminating the first few steps. The darkness below seemed endless, thick like ink, swallowing any detail beyond the reach of my flashlight. And then, Just as I was about to take another step, I heard it again. The sound of someone shifting, the scrape of a shoe against concrete. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to run, to slam my bedroom door shut and pretend I never heard anything. But something about the way the footsteps paused, like whoever was down there was waiting for me to move first, made my legs lock up. My body refused to listen to reason. I just stood there, teetering between fight and flight, caught in a moment that stretched unbearably long. And then, from the basement, in the quietest voice imaginable, I heard a whisper. "I know you're there." I stumbled back so fast I nearly dropped my phone. My breath hitched in my throat, and my whole body broke out in a cold sweat. That voice. It wasn't normal. It was too calm, too deliberate, like whoever was down there wasn't surprised to find me standing at the top of the stairs, like they expected me. I did the only thing I could think of. I bolted. I ran straight to my room, slammed the door and locked it, my fingers fumbling over the deadbolt. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold my phone. I pulled up the keypad to call 911, but my thumb hovered over the screen. What was I supposed to say? That I locked my basement door and now it was open? That I thought I heard footsteps? That someone might be down there? The cops wouldn't take that seriously. I held my breath, pressing my ear against the door again, listening. Nothing. The house was dead silent. No more footsteps, no more whispers, just the faint creak of the old wood settling. My pulse was still racing, but for a moment, I let myself believe it was over. That maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was just a weird draft, a trick of my overtired brain. But then, so quietly I almost didn't hear it, there was a sound. A click. I froze. The basement door. It had just latched shut. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my bed, gripping my phone, every muscle in my body tense. I waited for something else to happen. For another sound, another whisper, anything. But nothing came. Eventually, as the sun started rising, exhaustion won. My eyes burned from staying open too long, and my body ached from being on high alert for hours. I must have dozed off at some point, because when I opened my eyes again, it was morning. The house was quiet. Normal, but I knew better. The first thing I did when I got out of bed was check the basement door. It was closed, just like I left it the night before. But when I pressed my hand against it, I felt something cold. Not the usual chill of an old house. Something deeper, unnatural. My stomach twisted as I turned the knob, half expecting it to resist, to be locked from the other side. But it wasn't. It swung open easily, revealing the basement stairs leading into the dark. I stood there, staring down, every instinct in me screaming, "Don't go down there." But I had to. I had to prove to myself that there was nothing there, that it was just my mind playing tricks on me. My heart pounded as I slowly made my way down, one step at a time. The air grew heavier with each step, thick with a damp, musty smell. My phone flashlight barely cut through the gloom, but I could see enough. The basement was empty. No signs of forced entry, no footprints in the dust on the concrete floor. Just old storage boxes, a rusty furnace, and a single bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling. I forced a laugh, more out of relief than anything else. It had to have been the wind, or the old house settling. That was the only explanation. I shook my head, ready to go back upstairs until I noticed the footprints, not in the dust, in the concrete. My breath caught in my throat. They weren't mine. They were deeper, older, almost eroded into the floor. And they led straight from the bottom of the stairs to the very spot where I heard the whisper. A shiver ran down my spine as I slowly backed away, my mind racing with every possible explanation. But deep down, I knew. Whatever had been down here that night, it had always been here. I never used the basement again. I kept the door locked, pushed a heavy chair in front of it just in case. A few months later, my lease was up, and I moved out without looking back. I never told my landlord, never asked if the new tenant ever heard anything. Some things, I think, are better left unknown. But even now, years later, I still dream about that night. And in my dreams, I always wake up at 3 a.m. and hearing the basement door creak open. I was 13 the first time I ever felt real fear. Not the kind you get from watching horror movies or hearing ghost stories, but the kind that makes your stomach drop and your body go cold. My mom worked late shifts at the hospital back then, and I was used to being home alone in the evenings. It wasn't a big deal. I'd make myself a frozen pizza, turn on the TV, and pretend I didn't hear the weird creaks that old houses always make when no one else is around. We lived in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town, with big backyards and wooden fences separating each house. Nothing ever happened there. At least, that's what I thought. That night, everything felt normal at first. I had just finished eating and was flipping through channels when I saw something out of the corner of my eye, a shadow near the backyard fence. At first, I barely registered it. Probably a neighbor checking on something, or maybe one of the Miller's dogs got loose again. But something about the way the shadow moved, or didn't move, bothered me. It wasn't walking. It wasn't shifting. It was just standing there. I leaned forward, squinting through the glass door that led to the backyard, trying to see better. The figure was tall, barely illuminated by the glow of the streetlight behind the fence. It wasn't a neighbor. A chill ran down my spine. I don't know why, but I reached for the remote and turned off the TV, like I needed silence to process what I was seeing. The house instantly felt different, quieter, heavier. I stood up slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements, and took a few steps toward the window. The figure didn't move. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I reached for my phone, debating whether I should call my mom or just keep watching. That's when I saw something else. Another shadow. But this one wasn't at the fence. It was at the side window. I froze. The window was only a few feet away from me, separated by a thin layer of glass and a flimsy set of blinds that weren't even fully closed. My breath hitched in my throat as I turned my head, just barely. Through the slats of the blinds, I could see him. A man, standing right there, his face barely visible in the dim light. He wasn't moving, just watching. And for the first time in my life, I understood what it felt like to be prey. I wanted to run, but where? The front door was too close to the side window. If I moved, he'd see me. If I tried to get to my room, I'd have to pass by more windows. My fingers tightened around my phone as I backed away, step by step, heart slamming in my chest. I needed to call someone, my mom, the police, anyone. But before I could even unlock my screen, I heard something. A soft tapping on the glass. Not a knock. Not someone trying to get my attention. Just tapping. Like he wanted to see what I would do. I held my breath. Maybe if I stayed completely still, he'd think I wasn't here. Maybe he'd leave. But then, the back door handle rattled. My stomach dropped. I spun toward the sliding glass door, the one leading to the backyard. The figure at the fence was closer now, much closer. He was standing just beyond the porch light, his body still, his face hidden in shadow. But I could see his hand, just barely. It was resting on the handle, testing it. My breath hitched. Did I lock it? I couldn't remember. My mind was racing, panicking, trying to retrace my steps from earlier in the evening. I moved before I could second-guess myself, darting toward the back door as quietly as I could. My fingers fumbled against the lock. It was already set. Relief flooded me for a split second, until I realized something. The man at the side window had stopped tapping. I turned my head just enough to glance back, and my stomach clenched. He wasn't there anymore. The window was empty. My whole body tensed, waiting, listening. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I didn't even realize I was shaking until I saw my hands trembling in front of me. Then, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving along the side of the house. He was coming around. I had to do something. I darted to the front door, fingers shaking as I twisted the deadbolt, double-checking that it was secure. My brain was screaming at me to call someone, but I was so panicked I could barely think straight. I pressed my phone against my palm, finally managing to unlock it, when a new sound sent ice through my veins. A soft, metallic click from the backyard. The back gate. I didn't think. I just acted. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife I could find, my hands shaking so bad I almost dropped it. I pressed my back against the counter, forcing myself to listen. The footsteps were slower now, more calculated. Whoever this was, they weren't in a hurry. They were taking their time, knowing I had nowhere to go. My mind raced through every possibility. Could I make it to a neighbor's house? Could I hide? No, he had already seen me. Running outside would only corner me. My best bet was to stay put and call for help. I finally managed to pull up the keypad and dialed 911 with clumsy fingers. The line rang once, twice. Then, 911? What's your emergency? The voice on the other end was calm, but I could barely speak. Someone's outside, I whispered, my voice barely audible over the pounding in my ears. Two of them. They're trying to get in. The dispatcher started asking me questions. Was the door locked? Could I see their faces? I tried to answer, but my focus kept shifting back to the sounds outside. The footsteps had stopped. For a moment, the silence was worse than the noise. I strained to hear, every muscle in my body tense. Then, suddenly, bang! A loud, heavy thud against the back door. My body jolted. The dispatcher's voice sharpened. Are they trying to break in? Yes, I gasped. Another bang, harder this time. The glass shuddered, but it didn't break. My legs felt weak. Police are on their way, the dispatcher assured me, but their voice felt distant, like it was coming from underwater. I gripped the knife tighter, my knuckles white. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. No more pounding, no more footsteps, just silence. My pulse thundered in my ears as I stood there waiting, barely breathing. Then a new sound, a car engine. I ran to the front window and peeked through the blinds. Headlights flickered through the trees as a dark car rolled slowly down the street. I didn't see who was inside, but I knew. They were leaving. Not in a rush, not panicked, just leaving. Like they had finished whatever they came to do. I didn't move until I saw the red and blue lights flashing against the windows. When the police arrived, I practically collapsed with relief. I threw open the door, still clutching the knife in one hand, my phone in the other. The officer closest to me, Officer Daniels, I think, told me to put the knife down, his voice calm but firm. I dropped it on the counter and tried to explain everything, but the words came out jumbled, breathless. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see one of those figures standing there watching from the shadows. The cops searched the yard, the side of the house, even the street, but they didn't find anything. No footprints, no signs of forced entry, nothing. One of them suggested it might have been pranksters, but I could tell he didn't really believe it. I didn't either. They asked if I had seen any faces, any details that could help identify them. But the truth was, I hadn't. Just shadows, watching, waiting. The officers stayed for a while checking the area, but eventually they had to leave, and I was alone again. When my mom got home, she nearly had a panic attack. She called the cops again, demanding answers they didn't have. We double-checked all the locks, installed new ones the very next day, even got cameras for the yard. For a while, I barely slept. Every little noise made my heart race. Every shadow made my stomach twist. But they never came back. No strange figures, no tapping on the windows, no rattling door handles. It was like they had just vanished, like they had gotten exactly what they wanted. To this day, I don't know why they were there or what they were planning. I don't know if they picked my house at random or if they had been watching for a while. But I do know one thing. When you're home alone at night and you think you're being watched, you probably are. I was never the paranoid type. I lived in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where people still waved at each other from their driveways and left their porch lights on at night. My fiancé, Eric, worked the night shift at a hospital downtown, which meant I was alone most nights. It never really bothered me, until that night. It was around 10:30 p.m. and I was curled up on the couch, half watching some random crime documentary while scrolling through my phone. Then, out of nowhere, there was a knock at the door. Not a soft tap, but a firm, deliberate knock. I frowned, setting my phone down. We never got unexpected visitors this late. My first thought was, maybe Eric forgot something and had asked a friend to drop it off. But when I checked my phone, there were no messages from him. Slowly I got up and approached the door, my heart beating a little faster than I'd like to admit. Peering through the peephole, I saw a man standing there. He wore a brown delivery uniform, holding a small package in one hand. But something felt off. The logo on his shirt was faded, almost like it had been printed on a regular t-shirt rather than actual company-issued clothing. His posture was strange too stiff, like he was forcing himself to appear casual. I didn't order anything. My stomach tightened. Still, I stayed silent, hoping he'd just leave. But then he knocked again, louder this time. "Delivery!" His voice was deep, but there was no urgency in it. Just something that made my skin crawl. I hesitated, glancing toward the kitchen where I had left my phone. Maybe I should call Eric. But before I could move, something else happened that sent a cold wave of fear through me. From the back of the house, I heard the door handle rattle. I froze. My house had a small backyard enclosed by a tall wooden fence. There was no way someone could have just wandered back there. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized whoever was at the front door wasn't alone. They were trying to get in from the back too. My mind raced. Should I run? Call the cops? The man at the door knocked again, harder this time, almost impatient. I had seconds to decide what to do. I backed away from the front door, moving as quietly as I could. My phone was still in the kitchen, but that meant passing the back door, and I wasn't sure if I could do that without being seen. My breath came in shallow, uneven gasps as I tiptoed toward the counter. The rattling at the back door had stopped, but now there was a new sound, a faint scraping, like someone was trying to pick the lock. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. This wasn't just some lost delivery guy. Someone was trying to get in. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and immediately called Eric. No answer. Of course, he was probably busy at work. I didn't want to make noise, but I also didn't want to be alone with this anymore. I dialed 911, pressing the phone against my ear while keeping my eyes locked on the back door. The operator picked up, and I whispered as quietly as I could, "There's someone at my house. They're trying to get in." I gave my address, my voice barely above a breath, terrified that if I spoke any louder, they would hear me. Suddenly, there was a loud bang at the front door. I jumped so hard I nearly dropped the phone. The man had started pounding on it with his fist, harder and harder. "I know you're in there," he yelled, his voice losing its fake professional tone. My stomach twisted. This wasn't a random break-in. He had been watching. He knew I was home. The 911 operator asked me to stay on the line, but my whole body was in full panic mode. I needed to do something now. Then the doorknob at the back twisted violently. The lock held, but it wouldn't hold forever. I scanned the kitchen for anything I could use as a weapon. A knife, a pan, anything. That's when I remembered. Eric had left his baseball bat in the hallway closet. If I could just reach it without making a sound, I might have a chance. But I had to move fast. I moved as quickly and silently as I could, slipping down the hall toward the closet. The bat was wedged between some coats, and my fingers fumbled around it as the pounding on the front door grew more aggressive. My heartbeat was so loud I swore they could hear it. Just as I pulled the bat free, the sound of shattering glass made me whip around. The kitchen window, one of them had broken it. A rush of adrenaline hit me so hard I felt lightheaded. This was it. They were coming in. I bolted back into the living room, gripping the bat with both hands. My only thought was, don't freeze. The sound of someone climbing through the window sent ice through my veins. Footsteps, heavy ones, hit the kitchen floor. "She's in here," a voice muttered, low and calm, like they were talking about a damn stray cat. I swallowed down a sob, my whole body shaking. The 911 operator was still on the phone, but I didn't dare speak. I couldn't. Then, the most beautiful sound in the world, sirens. Flashing red and blue lights poured through the windows, and the men inside reacted instantly. Heavy footsteps thundered back through the kitchen, a muffled curse, then the sound of someone running. I heard the front door burst open as multiple officers stormed in. I didn't even realize I was crying until one of them was in front of me, asking if I was hurt. My hands were locked around the bat so tightly I couldn't let go. It took me a second to understand. I was safe. They were gone. Later, the police told me the delivery guy was a known home invader. He and an accomplice had been targeting women home alone, dressing up as workers to gain trust. If I had opened the door, I don't even want to think about it. I moved out of that house a month later. Eric and I got a place together in a building with security, cameras, the whole deal. Even now, I still get nervous when someone knocks at my door. Because that night, I learned something I wish I hadn't. Sometimes the monsters don't hide. Sometimes they walk right up to your front door and knock. I never used to believe in the kind of stories people share online about things lurking in their homes. But after what happened that night, I don't know what to believe anymore. It was a Tuesday, early November, cold enough that the windows fogged up at night. My wife was away on a work trip, so it was just me and my 2-year-old son, Liam. He had been extra fussy that evening, fighting sleep like toddlers do. So I stayed in his room longer than usual, rubbing his back until his breathing slowed, and he finally drifted off. I remember standing there for a moment just watching him, before I quietly slipped out, leaving the baby monitor on like always. I went downstairs to clean up, scrolling through my phone absent-mindedly between wiping down the counter and picking up stray toys. Every few minutes I'd check the baby monitor app, more out of habit than worry. The feed showed the usual, a grainy black and white image of Liam curled up under his blanket. I was halfway through rinsing a bottle in the sink when I glanced at the screen again, expecting to see the same thing. But this time, something was different. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. The shadows in the room seemed off, stretched in a way that didn't make sense. And then, behind the crib, something moved. It wasn't Liam. That much I knew instantly. The shape was wrong, too tall, too angular. It was barely visible in the dim light, just a dark blur shifting in the background. My breath caught in my throat as I stared, waiting for it to move again. And then, before I could react, the feed distorted. The entire screen warped, lines of static flickering across it like an old VHS tape. A second later, it went black. My heart slammed against my ribs. I tapped at the screen, refreshed the app, tried everything I could to bring the feedback, but nothing worked. That was when I heard it. Soft, deliberate footsteps upstairs. For a moment I just stood there, my mind scrambling to make sense of what I had just seen. The logical part of me wanted to believe it was a glitch, that the baby monitor had lost connection at the worst possible time. But those footsteps, those weren't a glitch. They were slow, careful, moving just above me. I turned off the sync, straining to listen, my pulse thudding in my ears. Liam couldn't have climbed out of his crib. He was too small. And even if he had, he wouldn't be walking like that. Not with that steady, deliberate rhythm. I grabbed the closest thing I could find, a heavy metal flashlight we kept in the junk drawer, and started up the stairs, every step making the old wooden boards creak beneath me. The house felt different all of a sudden, like something had shifted while I wasn't looking. The air was thicker, heavier. I could feel my own breathing, shallow and uneven. But I didn't call out. I didn't want to. I wasn't sure I wanted to know what would answer. As I reached the top of the stairs, another sound stopped me cold. A faint rustling like fabric brushing against the crib. Liam's door was still cracked open just as I had left it. The hallway was dark except for the thin strip of light spilling from the nightlight in his room. My fingers tightened around the flashlight as I took a step closer, my free hand pushing the door open the rest of the way. The nursery looked exactly the same, except for one thing. The baby monitor's camera, mounted in the corner of the room, had been turned. It was facing the wall. I felt a sharp, electric chill run through me. I knew for a fact I hadn't moved it. No one else had been in the house. No one I could explain anyway. I forced myself to step inside, every instinct screaming at me to get out. The crib was just a few feet away, and when I reached it, I let out a shaky breath. Liam was still there, sleeping peacefully, his tiny hand curled into a fist. I ran a hand gently over his back, just to be sure, and he stirred slightly but didn't wake. But as I straightened up, something made the hairs on my neck stand on end. From the baby monitor speaker still connected to my phone, I heard a whisper. Not Liam's voice, not mine. Just one word, low and distorted, crackling through the static. Watching. I backed away from the crib so fast I nearly tripped over one of Liam's stuffed animals. My pulse was hammering, my skin cold despite the heat creeping up my neck. I wanted to believe I had misheard it. Maybe it was interference. Baby monitors pick up strange frequencies all the time, right? But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. The voice had been too close, too deliberate. Someone, something, was in this house. I turned, scanning the room, my grip tightening around the flashlight. The closet door was slightly ajar. It hadn't been like that earlier. I was sure of it. My stomach twisted as I inched closer, my breath coming in short, uneven bursts. The door creaked softly when I nudged it open with the flashlight. Inside, rows of tiny clothes hung still, untouched. A stack of diapers sat in the corner, nothing out of place. But just as I started to exhale, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The baby monitor camera, it wasn't just turned toward the wall. The wires had been cut. Frayed ends dangled limply from the base, like something had ripped them apart with jagged precision. That didn't happen on its own. That wasn't a malfunction. My hands felt numb as I stared at it, the pieces clicking together in my mind. The movement on the screen, the distortion, the voice, the footsteps. Something had been in here. Maybe it still was. A sudden thud echoed from the hallway. A deep, heavy sound, like something dropping onto the floor just outside the door. I spun around so fast the flashlight nearly slipped from my grip. My heart pounded in my ears. Liam stirred in his sleep, letting out a tiny whimper. I couldn't stay in this room. We couldn't stay in this room. I scooped Liam up in my arms, his little body warm and limp with sleep, and turned toward the door. My hands were shaking so badly that I fumbled with the doorknob for a second before yanking it open. The hallway was empty. At least that's what I told myself. But the air felt wrong, thick, charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. The shadows seemed deeper, stretching in ways that didn't make sense. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to get out now. I moved fast, holding Liam close as I stepped into the hallway. That's when I heard it again. Not footsteps this time. Breathing. Slow, raspy, right behind me. I froze. My body locked up so suddenly that Liam stirred in my arms, mumbling something sleepily against my shoulder. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Every muscle in my body screamed to move, to run, but I felt trapped in that moment, caught between fight and flight. And then, right next to my ear, so close I could feel the breath against my skin, a whisper. "He's not yours." A cold, clawing terror gripped me, snapping me out of my paralysis. I bolted. I didn't care if I looked insane. I sprinted down the stairs, clutching Liam so tightly that he let out a drowsy, confused protest. My feet barely touched the steps as I flew toward the front door. I fumbled with the lock, my fingers slipping, my vision tunneling with sheer panic. And just as I wrenched the door open, I risked one last glance over my shoulder. There, at the top of the stairs, just beyond the dim glow of the nightlight, something stood. A shape, impossibly tall and distorted, like the static from the monitor had bled into real life. Its head tilted slightly as if it were studying me. And though I couldn't make out a face, I felt its gaze, heavy and hollow and hungry. I didn't wait to see what it would do. I ran. I sprinted out into the cold night, the pavement rough beneath my bare feet. Liam was awake now, clinging to me, his tiny fingers digging into my shirt. I didn't stop until I reached my car parked in the driveway. My hands were trembling so badly that I struggled to get the keys out of my pocket. But somehow, I managed to unlock the door and throw myself inside. I locked the doors, turned the engine on, and peeled out of the driveway, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Whatever was in that house, I didn't want to see if it was still watching. I just drove. I didn't have a plan, no destination in mind. I just needed to get away. The only thing I could think of was my parents' house across town. It was nearly 3 a.m. when I pulled into their driveway, my entire body still shaking. I sat there for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel, listening to Liam's soft breathing in the back seat. And then, as if waking from a daze, I grabbed my phone. The baby monitor app was still open. The feed was still black. But just as I was about to close it, something flickered across the screen. A single frame, grainy and distorted, like a corrupted video file. It lasted less than a second, but it was enough. The nursery, the crib, and something standing over it. Something tall, leaning over the empty space where Liam should have been. I deleted the app. I never went back to that house alone. The next morning I called a moving company, packed whatever I could, and left. I never told my wife the full story. I just said something about feeling unsafe, about a break-in that never really happened. We moved across town, somewhere new, somewhere that felt safe. But even now, months later, I still wake up in a cold sweat, remembering that whisper in my ear. "He's not yours." I don't know what it meant. I don't want to know. But sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet, I swear I still hear it, faint and distant, crackling like static through a speaker that isn't even there. I remember that day so clearly, even though I wish I didn't. It was a Wednesday, early fall, and I was home sick from work. Nothing serious, just a nasty cold that had left me feeling drained. My husband, Adam, was out of town on a business trip, so I had the whole house to myself. I spent most of the afternoon curled up on the couch, half watching TV, half dozing, with a pile of tissues on the coffee table. The house was quiet, except for the occasional hum of passing cars outside. I must have drifted off at some point because the next thing I remember is waking up to a sound that sent ice through my veins, the unmistakable click of my front door unlocking. For a few seconds, I lay there, groggy and confused. My brain struggled to process what I had just heard. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was just the house settling? But then, ever so slowly, the door creaked open, just an inch, and it stopped. I couldn't breathe. Adam wasn't due back until the weekend, and no one else had a key. I strained my ears trying to pick up any sound beyond the soft buzz of the muted television. Nothing. No footsteps, no rustling. Just silence, thick and heavy. My heart pounded so hard I thought whoever was outside might hear it. Moving as slowly as I could, I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling as I unlocked it. I tapped the security app, bringing up the live feed from our front door camera. The screen loaded, and there he was. A man, just standing there, motionless, his hand still gripping the doorknob. He wasn't trying to push the door open. He wasn't knocking. He was just holding it, like he was waiting. I stared at the screen, frozen in place. His head was tilted slightly forward, his face obscured by the angle of the camera. I wanted to scream, but the sound got stuck in my throat. Then, slowly, agonizingly slowly, he turned his head toward the camera. Not a quick glance. Not a natural movement. It was deliberate, controlled. As if he knew I was watching. The way he looked at the camera made my skin crawl. He didn't react with surprise, like someone caught in the act. There was no panic, no hesitation. Just a slow, calculated turn of his head, until his face was fully visible. And then, he smiled. Not a friendly smile. Not even a mocking one. It was something else entirely. Something empty, like he was performing an expression he didn't really understand. My stomach twisted. I wanted to call 911, but I was terrified that any movement would somehow break the fragile moment of stillness. Like if I shifted even an inch, he would know. My fingers hovered over the screen, ready to dial, but then he did something worse. He raised his free hand, the one that wasn't on the doorknob, and brought a single finger to his lips. A silent shh. My breath hitched. I wasn't just being watched, I was being warned. I couldn't take it anymore. I scrambled off the couch, knocking my phone against the table in my panic. It clattered loudly, and I grabbed it with shaking hands, finally pressing the call button. My pulse roared in my ears as the phone rang once, twice. Then, in an instant, the screen went black. My phone died. I knew it had been charged. I knew it. But there I was, staring at my own reflection in the dark screen, my panic rising like bile in my throat. I looked back at the camera feed, but the app had closed. My hands were so unsteady that I fumbled trying to reopen it. When it finally loaded, my stomach dropped. The man was gone. The door was still slightly ajar, swaying ever so slightly like it had just been released. But he wasn't there. I shot to my feet, backing away from the entrance like it might burst open at any second. The house suddenly felt too open, too vulnerable. And then I heard it. A soft, deliberate tap from inside the house. The sound came from the hallway near the back of the house. A single, deliberate tap, like the toe of a shoe gently knocking against the wooden floor. I felt my entire body lock up. He hadn't just left. He was inside. My mind raced through possibilities. Did I forget to lock the back door? Did he somehow force his way in without me hearing? None of it made sense, but it didn't matter. He was here, and I was alone. I took slow, careful steps backward, my socks barely making a sound against the hardwood. I needed to get out, get to a neighbor's house, flag down a car, something. But my keys were on the kitchen counter, right past the hallway where I'd heard the noise. If I went that way, I'd have to pass whatever was waiting in the shadows. My eyes darted to the front door, still slightly open. Could I make it? If I ran fast enough? But what if he was waiting for me to do exactly that? Then another sound. This time, closer. Not a tap, but a soft inhale, like someone trying not to breathe too loudly. My chest tightened. I didn't think. I moved. I bolted for the front door, yanking it open so hard it slammed against the wall. Cold evening air hit my face as I stumbled onto the porch. My legs barely felt attached to my body as I sprinted down the driveway, my bare feet smacking against the pavement. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I reached the house across the street and pounded on the door, gasping for breath. Lights flicked on inside, and after what felt like an eternity, my neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, cracked the door open. Her face shifted from irritation to concern the moment she saw me. "What's wrong?" she asked, but I couldn't get the words out. I just pointed at my house, my whole body trembling. She pulled me inside, locking the door behind me. I collapsed onto her couch, my head spinning. I was safe. Or so I thought. Mrs. Callahan sat beside me, her wrinkled hands gripping mine as she tried to calm me down. "Breathe, sweetheart. Tell me what happened." But how could I? How could I explain that a man had somehow unlocked my front door, stood there without coming in, then vanished, only to reappear inside my house? My words came out broken, scattered, barely making sense. She reached for her landline phone, ready to call the police, when something outside caught her eye. Her gaze shifted past me toward her living room window. I turned, following her stare, and my stomach flipped. My house, just across the street, dimly lit from the porch light, looked normal. Too normal. The front door was closed. The living room window, where I'd left the curtains half open, was now completely shut. And then in the darkness, a shape moved. Not outside. Inside. A shadow passed through the faint glow of my kitchen. Too smooth. Too slow. He was still there. Mrs. Callahan must have seen it too, because she muttered something under her breath and pressed the phone to her ear. "Yes, I need an officer immediately," she said, her voice firm but shaken. She gave my address, describing an intruder inside my house. I wanted to tell her more, to tell the dispatcher that this wasn't a normal break-in. But what could I even say? That the man hadn't forced his way in, hadn't stolen anything, hadn't even spoken, just watched? The police arrived within minutes. 2 officers, guns drawn, moving through my house like they expected a fight. But there was nothing. No broken locks, no signs of forced entry. No one hiding inside. The only thing out of place was the front door. It was locked from the inside. One officer looked at me skeptically. "Are you sure you saw someone inside?" I opened my mouth to answer, but then my eyes landed on the floor, right where I'd been standing when I heard that first tap. A single wet footprint leading deeper into the house. I pointed at the footprint, my throat tightening. "That wasn't there before," I whispered. The officers followed my gaze, their expressions shifting from doubt to something more serious. One of them, Officer Reynolds, crouched down, running his flashlight over the floor. The print was smeared, like whoever left it had been moving carefully, deliberately. The strange part? There were no others. No trail leading from the door. Just one in the middle of the hallway. "Could be condensation," the other officer muttered, but he didn't sound convinced. I wasn't either. I knew what I had seen. I knew that someone had been in my house, but no windows were unlocked, no doors tampered with. It was as if he had disappeared the same way he had appeared, without a trace. Officer Reynolds sighed and stood up. "We'll do a full sweep, just in case. But if he's gone, he's gone. You should stay somewhere else tonight." I didn't argue. There was no way I was stepping back into that house alone. Mrs. Callahan offered her guest room, and I accepted without hesitation. The officers checked every inch of the house, closets, basement, attic, nothing. When they finally left, they told me to call if anything else happened. I thanked them, but I could tell they didn't believe me. Maybe I wouldn't have believed me either. That night I lay awake in Mrs. Callahan's spare room, every noise making my heart pound. The wind against the window, the hum of the refrigerator down the hall, everything felt too sharp, too present. I kept my phone gripped in my hand, refreshing the security camera feed over and over. Nothing. Just the quiet, empty front porch. But then, around 3 a.m., the motion alert went off. My breath caught in my throat as I tapped the notification. The live feed loaded, and my blood ran cold. The front door was open again, and standing in the doorway was the man, motionless, watching. I stared at the screen, my entire body locked in place. He didn't move. He didn't step inside. He just stood there, one hand on the doorknob, the other hanging loosely at his side. Like before. Like he was waiting. But for what? My throat was so tight I could barely swallow. I wanted to wake Mrs. Callahan, but something about the way he stood there, so still, so patient, made me feel like even that would somehow break whatever fragile moment was happening. Then, just like before, he turned his head toward the camera. That slow, deliberate motion. That hollow, unnatural smile. My chest ached from holding my breath. But this time, he did something different. He raised his free hand again, not to shush me, but to wave. A small, lazy wave, as if he knew I was watching. As if he was acknowledging me. I nearly dropped my phone. My mind screamed at me to do something, to call the police again, but just as I moved my thumb toward the emergency button, he was gone. 1 second he was there. The next, the feed showed nothing but my open doorway, the porch light buzzing against the empty night. No movement, no retreating figure, no shadow slipping away into the dark. He had just vanished. I sat up in bed, every inch of me shaking. This wasn't just some attempted break-in. He wasn't trying to rob me. He didn't want anything. He was just showing me that he could be there, that he had been there, and that he could come back anytime he wanted. I never went back to that house. The next morning, I packed a bag, booked a hotel, and called Adam. We put the house on the market before he even got home. I never told him everything. I couldn't. How do you explain something like that? The new owners never reported anything strange, and I never saw the man again. But sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, my heart pounding for no reason, I reach for my phone and check my camera feed. Just to be sure. Just in case.